The taillights of a black 1988 Pontiac Grand Am receded into the inky darkness of a rural Tennessee road. Inside, two teenagers on the cusp of adulthood vanished. Just like that, dissolved into the night. In Sparta, a quiet town where everyone knows everyone, where secrets echo through school hallways and stories spread like wildfire, the disappearance of Erin and Jeremy Bechtel wasn't just a local tragedy. It was an impossible riddle. No clues, no demands, no reason. Only a deepening void where two young lives once shined. Before we dive into their story, tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from today? From After the Silence. This is how one ordinary night turned into a two-decade mystery. April 3rd, 2000, dawned with the quiet promise of an early spring in Sparta, Tennessee. The small, rural town, nestled amidst the rolling hills and verdant valleys of White County, awoke to the familiar rhythms of daily life. Main Street, lined with brick storefronts that had stood for generations, would soon bustle with its customary traffic. Children would fill the classrooms of White County High School, and the murmur of conversation would rise from local diners. Sparta was a community built on familiarity and trust, a place where the concept of a stranger was almost alien, and the notion of profound, inexplicable loss felt as distant as the great cities beyond the Appalachian foothills. It was a town where secrets, when they existed, were often whispered in hushed tones, and news, good or bad, spread with the swiftness of a forest fire. This inherent sense of security, deeply ingrained in the fabric of the community, would soon be irrevocably fractured. For 18-year-old Erin, the day was colored by the vibrant hues of impending freedom. Having recently celebrated her birthday, Erin was on the cusp of graduating from White County High School. Her academic record was exemplary, her teachers often remarking on her meticulous attention to detail and her innate drive for perfection. Yet, Erin was far from a cloistered scholar. She possessed a vivacious, outgoing personality, a natural energy that drew people to her. Her presence could effortlessly brighten a room, her laughter easily echoing through the school hallways. Friends knew her as someone who took life seriously, but also knew how to embrace its joys. She was a young woman with a clear vision for her future, one that included moving out and embarking on the adventure of independent living, a topic she had recently discussed with her family. Jeremy Bechtel, 17, shared many of Erin's final classes at White County High. Their friendship was a testament to the enduring bonds forged in small towns, a connection built over years of shared experiences, from elementary school playgrounds to high school dances. Jeremy was an athlete, dedicating his time and energy to the school's sports programs, known for his commitment and easygoing demeanor. He and Erin were simply friends, their camaraderie unburdened by romantic complications, a genuine connection that many observed and admired. On this particular Monday, as the last vestiges of winter faded and spring asserted its dominance, Erin and Jeremy had made plans for a casual evening gathering with friends, a prelude to the fast-approaching graduation celebrations. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, Erin's black 1988 Pontiac Grand Am sat in the driveway, a symbol of her burgeoning independence. The car, though a decade old, was her pride and joy, her passport to the wider world beyond Sparta's familiar limits. She picked up Jeremy first, their exchange likely typical, filled with the easy banter of longtime friends. Their initial destination was the local arcade, a familiar teenage haunt, where they were to collect Erin's younger brother, Will Foster. The interior of the arcade would have been a cacophony of flashing lights and electronic beeps, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and adolescent energy. Will, likely engrossed in a game, would have greeted them with the casual indifference of a younger brother, quickly gathering his belongings for the ride home. The three teenagers then drove back to the Foster residence, the Pontiac navigating the familiar streets of Sparta. Upon arrival, Erin briefly stepped inside, leaving Jeremy and Will in the car. Inside, she found her mother, and the ensuing conversation was entirely unremarkable. Erin requested permission to extend her curfew, a common request from a high school senior nearing adulthood. Her mother, ever cautious but trusting, looked out the window. She saw Jeremy waiting in the car, his presence a reassuring anchor. Erin was not alone. She was with a trusted friend. The consent was given, a simple nod, a casual word of caution. It was a moment entirely devoid of premonition, a snapshot of everyday family life in a peaceful community. The goodbye was perfunctory, a quick exchange before Erin returned her car. Back in the Pontiac, the doors closed, sealing the three teenagers inside. What was dropped off at the house, a final, fleeting interaction with his older sister and her friend. Then, as the evening deepened into full darkness, the black Pontiac Grand Am, carrying Erin and Jeremy, departed the Foster property. Witnesses would later place their last sighting around 10 o'clock that night. The car's taillights, two distant crimson points, receded quickly into the impenetrable blackness of White County's rural roads. The sound of the engine, a fleeting hum, soon dissipated into the vast quiet. With their departure, Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel, two vibrant, promising teenagers, simply dissolved. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind no indication, no warning, only the growing silence. The morning of April 4th broke with the deceptive calm of any other Tuesday. Ronnie Bechtel, Jeremy's father, a man of routine and punctuality, prepared to pick up his son. Jeremy had called him around 9 o'clock the previous night, a casual conversation about logistics for the following day. It was an ordinary exchange, the kind that forms the quiet backbone of family life, devoid of any unusual inflections or concerns. Ronnie arrived at the prearranged spot, expecting to see Jeremy waiting. But the spot was empty. No Jeremy. Initial thoughts were dismissive. Perhaps a miscommunication. A slight delay. Teenagers. Ronnie waited, but his son did not appear. A subtle shift occurred in his demeanor, the easygoing anticipation replaced by a creeping unease. He attempted to call Jeremy, but there was no answer. The silence on the other end of the line was not merely an absence of sound. It was a burgeoning void. The intuitive dread that only parents understand began to tighten its grip, a cold premonition that something was wrong, profoundly wrong. With growing apprehension, Ronnie then placed a call to the Foster residence. The phone rang, each tone amplifying his anxiety. When the call was answered, the news delivered was a fresh blow. Erin, too, had not returned home. The collective disbelief was palpable, even through the telephone line. Two teenagers from two separate households, both missing after a routine evening. The sheer unlikelihood of it began to sow the seeds of panic. Hundreds of miles away, in Cincinnati, Ohio, Cecil Foster, Erin's father, was engrossed in his work. The routine of his day was suddenly, brutally interrupted by the ringing of his phone. The voice on the other end was his wife's, strained and desperate. "I called home Monday night," Cecil would later recall, the memory etched with the distinct terror of that moment. "And my wife told me that Erin didn't come home last night." The words hung heavy in the air, transforming the mundane details of his workday into a nightmare. Cecil's immediate reaction, shared by his wife and Ronnie Bechtel, was an attempt to rationalize the inexplicable. Erin was 18. She was an adult, strong-willed, and independent. She had spoken recently of her desire to forge her own path, to live on her own. Perhaps the desperate hope clung to she had simply chosen to leave, to begin her new life somewhere else, without fanfare, without warning. It was a painful thought, a betrayal of trust, but it was infinitely preferable to the unfolding reality. But as the hours turned into an agonizing day, and then another, that fragile shield began to buckle. The initial hope that Erin and Jeremy had simply decided to embark on a spontaneous adventure began to disintegrate. Each passing minute without contact, each unanswered call, each hushed conversation between the two families chipped away at the comforting rationalizations. The casual goodbyes of Monday night now resonated with a chilling finality. The quiet sense of security that had defined Sparta for so long began to crack, revealing a terrifying void beneath. The silent panic, once a whisper, now began to roar, threatening to consume everything in its path. The creeping tendrils of panic, first felt by Ronnie Bechtel and Erin's mother, rapidly tightened their grip on the quiet community of Sparta. The morning of April 4th transitioned from uneasy speculation to a stark, chilling reality. Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel were not simply running late, nor had they spontaneously decided to embark on a secret adventure. They were gone. The urgency escalated from a private family concern to a public emergency. By late morning, the White County Sheriff's Department was formally alerted, marking the official commencement of an investigation that would define the town's collective memory for over 2 decades. Initial law enforcement response was swift, albeit measured. White County was not accustomed to such inexplicable disappearances. Its crime rates were low, its incidents typically confined to minor infractions or domestic disputes. A missing person case involving two local teenagers, particularly under such baffling circumstances, was an anomaly that immediately drew the full attention of the small department. The investigation began with a foundational premise, one that seemed logical given the limited information available at the time. Erin and Jeremy had reportedly been heading to a party that Monday night. Therefore, the immediate focus of the police efforts centered on tracing their movements from that presumed last location. Detectives, led by the then-current sheriff, began systematically interviewing everyone who had attended the gathering. The party, a typical high school affair, had taken place at a friend's house on the outskirts of Sparta. Each attendee was questioned, their accounts meticulously recorded. Had anyone seen anything unusual? A heated argument? An unwelcome guest? A suspicious vehicle? The answers, frustratingly, were uniform in their emptiness. Everyone recalled Erin and Jeremy arriving, mingling with friends, and then, at some point, leaving together in Erin's black Pontiac Grand Am. There were no altercations, no whispered threats, no discernible signs of trouble. The two teenagers simply departed and were never seen again by those at the party. The complete absence of any tangible clues, any shred of evidence pointing to foul play or struggle, created an immediate and profound void in the investigation. There was no crime scene, no forced entry, no struggle, no property stolen, nothing to suggest that a criminal act had occurred. The lack of concrete leads was not just frustrating. It was disorienting, leaving investigators with little more than the fact of two young lives inexplicably cut short. White County's unique geographical features soon propelled a terrifying hypothesis to the forefront of the investigation: a tragic accident. The region was characterized by its challenging terrain. Roads were not straight, flat expanses. Instead, they were often narrow, winding ribbons of asphalt that snaked through dense forests and along the banks of the Calfkiller River. Many of these roads featured sharp, unexpected curves, often perched precariously atop steep bluffs with unforgiving drop-offs. In 2000, safety infrastructure like guardrails was notably sparse or entirely absent on many of these rural routes. Driving these roads at night, particularly for less experienced drivers, was an inherently treacherous endeavor. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the reach of headlights, and any momentary lapse in concentration, any unexpected obstacle, could have catastrophic consequences. The area's historically low crime rate, coupled with the complete lack of any evidence of criminal activity, lent significant weight to the accident theory. It was easier, more palatable, for the community and law enforcement alike to conceive of a tragic mishap than a premeditated act of violence in their peaceful town. Investigators began to theorize that Erin, perhaps unfamiliar with a particular stretch of road in the dark, or momentarily distracted, could have lost control of her vehicle. The Pontiac, with its two young occupants, might have veered off the road, plunging into the unforgiving depths of a river or disappearing into the concealment of a deep ravine. This became the leading, albeit still terrifying, explanation for their sudden vanishing. The pursuit of this theory initiated what would become one of the most extensive and grueling search operations in White County's history. Search and rescue teams were mobilized, their efforts spanning vast swathes of the rugged landscape. Divers, equipped with specialized gear, explored the murky, often treacherous waters of the Calfkiller River and its tributaries, as well as nearby lakes and ponds. Visibility in these waters was notoriously poor, often reduced to mere inches, forcing divers to rely almost entirely on their sense of touch in the frigid depths. Simultaneously, ground teams, comprising both law enforcement officers and dedicated community volunteers, painstakingly combed through dense vegetation, scaling steep embankments and navigating treacherous woodland. Every ditch, every culvert, every shadowed hollow was meticulously examined. The search expanded to include advanced technology. Specialized ground-penetrating radar equipment was brought in, its sensors sweeping across fields and suspected burial sites, hoping to detect any subterranean anomalies that might indicate a buried vehicle or human remains. Old, abandoned wells, dotted throughout the rural landscape, were systematically inspected, one by one, their dark shaft probed for any sign of the missing car or its occupants. Areas deemed suspicious due to local rumors or geological features were excavated, heavy machinery digging into the earth in desperate hopes of unearthing a clue. Yet, despite these exhaustive and multifaceted efforts, the black 1988 Pontiac Grand Am never appeared. It was as if the car, along with Erin and Jeremy, had been utterly swallowed by the earth, leaving behind no trace, no metallic glint, no disturbed soil, no shattered glass. The complete absence of any physical evidence, after such an immense expenditure of resources and manpower, became a haunting testament to the inexplicable nature of their disappearance. As days bled into weeks, and weeks into months, and the concrete truth remained elusive, the vacuum of information in Sparta began to fill with something far more insidious: rumors and conspiracy theories. In a small town, where uncertainty is an unwelcome intruder, speculation flourished like weeds in fertile soil. Stories, each more elaborate and fantastic than the last, began to circulate through whispered conversations at the local diner, over backyard fences, and in hushed tones at church functions. Some individuals, convinced that the teenagers had simply run away, claimed to have seen Erin and Jeremy alive and well, working in Pensacola, Florida. These unverified sightings, though lacking credible corroboration, gained enough traction to compel law enforcement to divert precious resources. Between 2005 and 2006, investigators traveled hundreds of miles to Florida, following these phantom leads, chasing shadows that ultimately led nowhere. Other rumors veered into far darker territory, speaking of more sinister possibilities. There were whispers of a drug deal gone awry, a secret transaction that had spiraled into violence. Some theories hinted at a premeditated murder, suggesting that Erin and Jeremy had somehow stumbled upon a dangerous secret or crossed paths with malevolent individuals. Even more disturbing were the conspiracy theories, implying that powerful local figures were involved, orchestrating a cover-up to protect their own. Each of these speculative narratives, though entirely unfounded by evidence, exacted a heavy toll. They diverted critical investigative resources, pulling detectives in myriad directions, siphoning attention away from the central, baffling fact: two teenagers and their car had simply vanished. For the Foster and Bechtel families, each passing day was a new and refined form of torture. Cecil Foster and Ronnie Bechtel, along with their wives, found themselves trapped in a horrifying loop, repeatedly replaying those last innocuous moments. Ronnie agonized over Jeremy's casual phone call, wondering if he had missed some subtle clue, some unspoken fear in his son's voice. Erin's mother replayed her simple goodbye, the fleeting glance out the window, the casual permission granted, tormented by the thought that she might have been the very last person to see her daughter alive. The crushing weight of not knowing where their children were, whether they were alive or dead, was an unbearable burden. The relentless speculation from the community, fueled by the sensational rumors, inflicted a secondary, emotional pain that cut just as deeply as the loss itself. Neighbors, once sources of comfort and familiarity, now contributed to the insidious hum of gossip. Each new, false story, each wild theory, was like a fresh laceration on a wound that refused to heal, tearing open the scab of their fragile hope and leaving them to bleed anew. The parents were forced to endure not only the profound agony of their loss, but also the cruel, public dissection of their children's last known moments, their lives reduced to fodder for small-town whispers and macabre speculation. The insidious grip of panic, initially a private torment for the Foster and Bechtel families, gradually tightened its hold on the entire community of Sparta. Days of frantic, hopeful searching blurred into weeks, then months, marked by the agonizing absence of Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel. The initial flurry of activity, the interviews, the ground searches, the desperate dives into the river, slowly receded into a grim, exhausting routine. Each passing day, without a breakthrough, chipped away at the collective hope, transforming the shock of their disappearance into a pervasive, aching despair. The bright optimism of spring faded into the oppressive heat of summer, then the crisp melancholia of autumn, and finally the stark silence of winter. With each changing season, the case, like the rural landscape it haunted, grew colder. The families, however, could not simply let go. Every anniversary of April 3rd became a somber marker, a cruel reminder of their enduring limbo. Every distant siren, every news report of a discovered car or remains in a neighboring county, sent their hearts lurching with a terrible mix of dread and faint, desperate hope. They were caught in a perpetual state of grief without resolution, a wound that refused to heal because the body was never found. The community, initially united in its search, slowly began to shift. The active search parties dwindled, replaced by hushed conversations and the painful, resigned knowledge that the mystery of Erin and Jeremy was now a permanent, indelible scar on Sparta's collective memory. The case, once front-page news, became a cold file, its pages yellowing in forgotten cabinets, its leads exhausted, its purpose fading into the static hum of other unsolved tragedies. For law enforcement, cold cases are rarely truly forgotten. They're simply moved to the back burner, their shadows perpetually lurking in the departmental archives. Detectives may retire, new officers may take their place, and the institutional memory of the specifics of a 2-decade-old disappearance may dim for some. But for the families, and for certain dedicated individuals within the system, the case remained a palpable, unresolved presence, a constant reminder of promises unkept. Then, in 2018, a new figure stepped into the spotlight of White County law enforcement. Sheriff Steve Page, a man with deep roots in the community and a profound sense of duty, took office. Page was intimately familiar with the Foster and Bechtel case. It had cast a long shadow over Sparta for much of his career. Unlike those who might view such an old, intractable mystery as a lost cause, Page saw it as an open wound, a lingering injustice. He made a public commitment, not merely as a political promise, but as a deeply held personal vow. "As long as I am sheriff," he declared, his voice firm and unwavering, "I will keep looking for these two young people." It was a statement that resonated deeply with the long-suffering families, a renewed flicker of hope in what had become an impenetrable darkness. True to his word, Sheriff Page initiated a meticulous, systematic review of the entire case file. This was no cursory glance. It was an arduous, painstaking commitment to dissecting every shred of information gathered over 2 decades. He dispatched officers to the storage facility, where dusty boxes, labeled and relabeled over the years, held the physical remnants of the investigation. Inside, faded manila folders contained hundreds, perhaps thousands of documents. Initial police reports, witness statements transcribed in looping cursive, search logs detailing grid patterns over fields and forests, forensic reports that yielded no clues, and newspaper clippings chronicling the agonizing passage of time. Page approached the task with the dedication of an archaeologist sifting through ancient ruins, convinced that a crucial artifact might lie hidden beneath layers of accumulated oversight. He set aside countless hours, often working late into the night, the only sound the rustle of aging paper and the low hum of the fluorescent lights. He read every word, every note, every observation, seeking not just what was there, but what might have been overlooked, misinterpreted, or simply lost in the sheer volume of information. The process was mind-numbing at times, a relentless grind through repetitive details and dead-end leads. He scrutinized witness interviews, looking for subtle discrepancies that might have been dismissed as minor. He reviewed maps of search areas, comparing them against his own intimate knowledge of White County's treacherous terrain. He cross-referenced dates and times, searching for any inconsistency, however minute, that might disrupt the established narrative. The monotony was often broken by flashes of detail, a name, a date, a description, that for a fleeting moment sparked a fresh line of inquiry, only to lead, usually, back to the same frustrating wall of silence. It was during one of these solitary, determined sessions, buried deep within a box marked Initial Reports 2000 to 2001, that Sheriff Page stumbled upon something that shattered the foundational understanding of the entire case. He was reviewing a series of early incident reports, initial police contacts, and family statements. His fingers, accustomed to the texture of old paper, grazed over a document that, for 2 decades, had been filed away, its critical detail obscured by the sheer volume of other information and the pervasive assumption of the original investigation. It was a brief, almost unremarkable entry within a more comprehensive report, detailing Erin's movements on the night of April 3rd. The report explicitly stated that after Erin and Jeremy picked up Wolf from the arcade, they drove him back to the Foster residence. Erin had then gone inside, spoken with her mother, and received permission to stay out later. Only after this interaction, and after Will had been dropped off, did Erin and Jeremy depart the property in the black Pontiac Grand Am. The words on the page leaped out at Paige, stark and undeniable. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. A cold, nauseating dread washed over him, quickly replaced by a surge of devastating frustration. For over 2 decades, every single search effort, every diver, every ground team, every sonar sweep, every excavation had been concentrated in the wrong area of the county. The initial premise, that the teenagers had disappeared directly from the party, had been the bedrock of the entire investigation. But this report, nestled quietly in the archives, fundamentally contradicted that premise. Erin and Jeremy had not vanished from the party. They had vanished from Erin's home. The geographical implications were immense and devastating. Erin's house was located on the opposite side of Sparta from where the party had taken place. This meant that the entire trajectory of their presumed travel was incorrect. If they disappeared while traveling from Erin's house, their route, and therefore the potential area of an accident or disappearance, shifted drastically. Decades of effort, countless hours of manpower, millions of dollars in resources, and most painfully, 2 decades of hope and anguish for the families had been directed along an entirely erroneous path. The heartbreaking truth was that the answer might have been agonizingly close all along in an area never thoroughly explored under the correct premise. Sheriff Page knew, with absolute certainty, that this discovery was monumental. It was the first true breakthrough in 21 years. He immediately shared this crucial new information with his limited staff. The renewed sense of purpose and urgency was palpable, but it was quickly tempered by a harsh reality: the limitations of a small county sheriff's department. While the department had dedicated personnel and unwavering commitment, they simply did not possess the advanced technological resources necessary to conduct extensive, new searches across a redefined, potentially vast area. They lacked cutting-edge sonar equipment capable of piercing the murky depths of the Calfkiller River with high precision. They didn't have the specialized dive teams or the significant budget required for prolonged operations in challenging underwater environments. They knew where to look, or at least where they should have looked, but they lacked the sophisticated tools and extensive manpower to effectively and exhaustively search the newly identified area of interest. The path forward was clear, yet the means to traverse it remained tragically out of reach. The enduring agony of the Foster and Bechtel families and the 2-decade-long stalemate in White County were tragedies that continue to fester, largely unseen by the wider world. While Sheriff Steve Page toiled in the quiet solitude of his office, meticulously poring over dusty files, more than 1,000 miles away, a man in Georgia was cultivating a unique approach to solving such cold cases. His name was Jeremy Sides, and in 2021, at the age of 42, he was known to tens of thousands of online followers as Nug. Sides was a father of 2 and a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, a background that had instilled in him a profound sense of discipline and a relentless drive. His civilian life in Georgia was, in many respects, ordinary, yet his passion was anything but. Sides was an unlikely, self-appointed cold case investigator, operating through the unconventional medium of a YouTube channel titled Exploring with Nug. What drove him to dedicate countless hours and considerable personal expense to this arduous, often thankless task was a deeply personal wellspring of grief. In his own high school years, he had endured the devastating loss of 2 close friends in a tragic car accident. The pain of that sudden, inexplicable void, the abrupt cessation of young lives, had never truly left him. "I remember that heartache," he would later reflect in interviews, his voice still carrying the weight of that distant trauma. "All this was going through my head as I looked for them. I couldn't imagine their friends, more than 20 years later, having no idea where they are, still searching. That profound, unresolved sorrow fueled his mission, transforming a personal tragedy into a universal quest for closure for others. Syed's journey into this specialized form of investigation began not with missing persons, but with a hobby, metal detecting. Initially, his interest lay in unearthing relics from the American Civil War, artifacts buried beneath the fields and forests of Georgia, silent witnesses to a bygone era. He found satisfaction in the meticulous search, the thrill of discovery, and the tangible connection to history. His colleagues, observing his knack for finding small treasures, began to playfully call him Nug, short for Gold Nugget, a moniker that stuck and eventually became the name of his burgeoning YouTube channel. Over time, his curiosity, combined with the sweltering Georgia summers, led him to explore local waterways. What began as a refreshing diversion, a way to cool off while still pursuing his passion for discovery, gradually evolved into something far more significant. He discovered that the same methodical approach and specialized equipment used for land-based metal detecting could be adapted to underwater environments. Recognizing the immense potential, Syed pursued and obtained his certification as a diver, mastering the complexities of underwater exploration. His focus began to shift. Instead of historical relics, he started to concentrate exclusively on cases of missing persons where a vehicle was involved and where bodies of water were a probable factor. He would meticulously comb through online databases, particularly the Charlie Project, a national resource dedicated to cataloging cold cases of missing individuals. He focused on cases that involved missing vehicles because, as he pragmatically observed, it's very difficult to make a car disappear completely. He believed that if a car had vanished, it had to be somewhere, most likely submerged, waiting to be found. His methodology was a unique blend of personal empathy, technological prowess, and relentless determination. His side-scan sonar equipment, operated from his boat, could create detailed, topographical maps of riverbeds and lake bottoms, revealing anomalies that might indicate a submerged vehicle, even in waters so murky that human vision was useless. In November of 2021, as autumn leaves painted the Georgia landscape, Jeremy both sides stumbled upon the case of Aaron Foster and Jeremy Bechtel in the Charlie Project database. The details resonated with his personal mission. Two teenagers, over 2 decades missing, their car vanished, and the omnipresent rivers of White County, Tennessee, a likely suspect. Everything he read, every cold report, convinced him that the 2 teenagers were somewhere beneath the surface, waiting. He saw the longevity of the case, the profound lack of answers, and knew instinctively that his unique skills might be precisely what was needed. Driven by this conviction, Syed traveled to Sparta, Tennessee, entirely on his own initiative and at his own expense. He brought with him his custom-fitted boat, equipped with its sophisticated sonar system, his diving gear, and an unwavering commitment to bringing resolution. However, as had been the case with the original investigators over 20 years prior, Syed initially focused his search efforts based on the publicly available information regarding the case. This information, disseminated through media reports and official, albeit outdated, public statements, consistently pointed to the party as the last known location of Erin and Jeremy. Consequently, Syed, like all those who had come before him, began his methodical sonar sweeps and underwater explorations in the vicinity of where the party had been held, meticulously covering areas upstream and downstream, probing every bend and depth of the river systems in that specific quadrant of White County. For days, he searched, his sonar painting detailed images of the riverbed, but yielding nothing that resembled a car. The frustration mounted, a familiar echo of the hopelessness that had plagued previous searchers. The turning point arrived on Sunday, November 28, 2021, an otherwise ordinary day in Sparta. Sheriff Steve Page was attending church, a routine solace in a life often consumed by the stark realities of his job. As the service concluded, he was approached by a member of the Foster family, her face etched with a mixture of weariness and a newfound, cautious excitement. "Sheriff," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "have you seen that video? The one from that man, exploring with Nug?" Page had not. The YouTube channel, with its niche focus on underwater cold cases, was outside his usual purview. But the urgency in her voice, and the fact that it was a Foster family member bringing it to his attention, compelled him to listen. He asked her to send him the link, a simple digital exchange that would soon alter the course of a 2-decade-old mystery. Later that evening, after returning home from church, Sheriff Page sat down to watch the video. As he viewed Side's methodical, yet ultimately fruitless, search in the areas around the party, a profound realization dawned on him. He recognized the potential inherent in Side's technology and unwavering dedication. Here was a man with the very tools and expertise his department lacked. The image of the aging report, hidden for so long in the archives, flashed in his mind. The critical, devastating detail about Erin and Jeremy's actual departure point. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had to connect with this man. Without hesitation, Page located Side's contact information, likely from the YouTube channel itself, and placed a call that same night. The conversation that ensued was the fulcrum upon which the entire case would finally turn. Page introduced himself, his voice steady but carrying the clear urgency of his discovery. "Mr. Sides," he began, "I'm Sheriff Steve Page from White County, Tennessee. I saw your video. You're doing incredible work." Sides, likely surprised to receive a call from a sheriff in the middle of the night, listened intently. Then, Page delivered the crucial, game-changing revelation, the missing piece of the puzzle that had eluded law enforcement for over 20 years. "Mr. Sides," Page explained, his voice carefully conveying the weight of the information, "you're looking in the wrong area. The teenagers didn't disappear from the party. They went back to Erin's house first. That's where they left from." He recounted his discovery from the old archives, explaining how the initial investigation had proceeded under a fundamentally incorrect premise. The geographical shift was immense, rendering all prior river searches largely irrelevant. Page then provided precise, updated instructions. "I need you to come back," he urged, "and focus your search along Highway 84, near the Calfkiller River. Specifically, the route Erin would have taken leaving her home." He described the treacherous nature of that particular stretch of road, the sharp curves, the steep embankments, the proximity to the river, all the factors that had made the accident theory so plausible from the very beginning. If only they had been looking in the right place. Jeremy, both sides, accustomed to following the cold trails of official reports, was taken aback by this startling new information. The fact that a sheriff was calling him a civilian YouTuber with such a critical, previously unknown detail spoke volumes. He absorbed the information, his mind immediately recalibrating the search parameters, visualizing the new area on his mental map of White County. The implications were immense. His frustration from the previous day's fruitless searches dissipated, replaced by a renewed, sharper focus. Without a moment's hesitation, Jeremy, both sides agreed. The call ended, marking the improbable alliance between a dedicated small-town sheriff and an amateur online sleuth, united by a common purpose and a new, startlingly precise direction. The long, silent vigil for Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel was about to come to an end. The urgent late-night phone call from Sheriff Steve Page had galvanized Jeremy, both sides. The frustration of fruitless searching dissolved, replaced by a laser-sharp focus and a precise vector. On November 30th, 2021, just 2 days after Page's call, Sides returned to Sparta, Tennessee. His custom boat, equipped with its sophisticated side-scan sonar system, his diving gear, and cameras, moved with quiet determination towards the new area of interest. Sides immediately directed his efforts to Highway 84, specifically the treacherous stretch that snaked alongside the Calfkiller River. This route, Erin Foster would have taken departing her home, was known for its sharp, unpredictable curves, the absence of guardrails in 2000, and its immediate proximity to the river's steep banks. The Calfkiller River presented a formidable challenge. Its waters were perpetually murky, a thick, opaque blend of algae, sediment, and tannin-stained runoff. Visibility, even on clear days, was typically measured in inches, making traditional visual searches impossible. Sides deployed his state-of-the-art side-scan sonar. From his boat, he began a methodical grid search, moving slowly and deliberately, his eyes glued to the high-resolution screen. The display translated sound waves into a topographical map of the river's unseen floor, showing the normal contours of rocks and submerged logs. Hours passed in intense, silent concentration. Then, an anomaly materialized on the screen. A distinct, unnatural shape emerged from the riverbed's organic contours. It was large, roughly rectangular, with characteristics that immediately triggered Sides' expert eye. It had the unmistakable outline of a vehicle, partially obscured by sediment, but undeniably man-made. His heart hammered. He ran multiple passes, refining the image. The shape was consistent. The dimensions were correct. It was approximately 4 meters, about 13 feet below the surface. The certainty was electrifying. He had found something monumental. With adrenaline surging, Sides meticulously prepared for his dive. He checked his tanks, adjusted his wetsuit, and secured his underwater camera and powerful dive light. Slipping into the frigid, opaque waters, the world above vanished. Absolute blackness enveloped him, broken only by his narrow dive light beam and the rhythmic sound of his breathing. He descended slowly, guided by the sonar's coordinates, moving towards the anomaly. After what felt like an eternity, his outstretched hand made contact. Cold, hard, metallic. It was a vehicle. Sides began a methodical exploration, his hands acting as his eyes. The metal was heavily encrusted with decades of algae and sediment. He moved to the rear of the vehicle, scraping away layers of grit. Beneath the green slime, his fingers brushed against raised letters. He scraped frantically, his breath fogging his mask. The word Pontiac slowly emerged. A jolt of recognition shot through him. This was the car. His trembling hands continued their urgent work, cleaning a larger area. He knew what he needed next, the license plate. More frantic scraping, more desperate searching. And then, his fingers closed over the unmistakable shape of a license plate, its characters obscured but present. With painstaking care, he cleared the numbers and letters, deciphering the full sequence in the inky darkness. Sides ascended to the surface, breaking through the dark water with a gasp. The license plate clutched firmly in his hand. Physically exhausted, emotionally overwhelmed, he immediately reached for his phone. He dialed Sheriff Page's number, his voice raw with emotion. "Sheriff," he stammered, "I found it. I found the car." Sheriff Page, who had been anxiously awaiting news, rushed to the scene. He found Sides on the riverbank, a lone figure holding the corroded license plate. Before even verifying the plate, Page, overcome by the enormity of the moment, moved forward and embraced Sides. It was a wordless acknowledgement, a silent communion that marked the end of 2 decades of agonizing uncertainty. With trembling hands, Page called dispatch and read out the license plate number. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, the voice from dispatch delivered the confirmation. The plate belonged to the black 1988 Pontiac Grand Am registered to Aaron Foster. After 21 years, 7 months, and 27 days, the mystery was solved. The discovery sent shockwaves through Sparta. Emergency rescue teams were immediately mobilized. The riverbank transformed into a bustling command center. Cranes arrived, and slowly, carefully, the recovery operation began. Heavy chains were affixed to the rusted chassis. Winches groaned, and inch by agonizing inch, the vehicle was hoisted from its watery grave. Dark, sediment-laden water streamed from every opening as the car emerged, dripping and transformed into the night air for the first time in over 2 decades. Its once black paint was gone, replaced by a thick crust of rust and algae. The windows were notably open. As the car was positioned on the riverbank, the grim reality became undeniable. Inside the severely corroded vehicle, human remains were discovered. The remains were carefully recovered and transported for forensic analysis. Subsequently, through DNA analysis and dental record comparisons, the identities were confirmed: Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel. The news was immediately conveyed to the Foster and Bechtel families. For Cecil Foster, Erin's father, the phone call from Sheriff Page was surreal. "I don't think I believed it." Even with him holding the license plate in his hand, he recounted. The discovery was poignant for him. He had fished in that very river with his younger son. Well, countless times, never imagining Erin was so close. The revelation brought a complex rush of emotions. "There's a sense of relief," he said. "Still hurts too, but I don't know if that ever goes away." For Ronnie Bechtel, Jeremy's father, the confirmation was devastating. It was, he described, like losing my son again. For 21 years, a sliver of hope, however faint, had persisted. Now, that possibility was irrevocably extinguished. For both families, after living in a torturous purgatory for so long, they could finally, belatedly, begin the impossible process of saying goodbye. The police investigation concluded no evidence of foul play. The most probable explanation was tragically simple. Erin lost control of the vehicle on Highway 84, a section lacking a guardrail, in 2000. The car veered off the road, plunged into the river, and sank rapidly. The open windows suggested a desperate escape attempt, but the suddenness, darkness, and disorientation made it impossible. In seconds, the car was swallowed by the calf killer. In 2022, Jeremy Bechtel was finally laid to rest. Erin Foster was cremated the same year. Their families, after decades of agonizing uncertainty, found a painful closure. Sheriff Steve Page gave unequivocal credit to Jeremy Sides. "I give Jeremy Sides the credit for finding that car," he publicly stated. "He had the technology, the dedication, and the courage to do what we couldn't do in over 20 years. The story of how a YouTube video solved a 21-year-old cold case is about more than technology. It is about the refusal to give up. It is about a sheriff who kept his promise. It is about a veteran who transformed personal grief into a mission. And, at its heart, it is about Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel, two vibrant teenagers whose lives were tragically cut short, finally found after resting silently in the Calfkiller River, waiting for the right person at the right time to look in the right place. The Calfkiller River, a silent, impassive witness for over 2 decades, finally surrendered its profound secret. From its murky, sediment-laden depths, a rusted black Pontiac Grand Am slowly emerged, carrying the indelible truth of Erin Foster and Jeremy Bechtel's fate. A forgotten line in an old report, the unyielding commitment of a local sheriff, and the unique, technology-driven pursuit of an amateur investigator ultimately converged to illuminate the tragic simplicity of a long-unsolved mystery, bringing an end to a 21-year vigil of agonizing uncertainty. This narrative stands as a poignant testament to the enduring power of human persistence and the relentless pursuit of truth, even when buried by time and circumstance. It speaks of the unforgiving passage of years, the profound, corrosive weight of unanswered questions that families bear, and the remarkable, almost improbable convergence of intuition, cutting-edge technology, and sheer human will. For Erin and Jeremy, 2 young lives tragically cut short on a spring night, the discovery brought a final, sorrowful peace, allowing their families to finally begin the arduous, deeply personal process of true mourning. It serves as a stark reminder that even in the deepest shadows, where hope has dwindled to a flicker, truth, however delayed and painful, can ultimately surface, bringing with it a measure of resolution to those left behind. What are your thoughts on this incredible, yet heartbreaking, resolution? How do you imagine the families endured such a prolonged period of uncertainty? And what does this case say about the powerful impact of modern, independent investigations in solving cold cases? Share your reflections and insights in the comments below. And if you find value in these detailed accounts and the tireless work to bring them to light, please consider liking this video and subscribing to After the Silence. Your support helps us continue to bring these critical stories to a wider audience.